When families become cults, the hidden architecture of generational indoctrination. Cults don't always wear robes or chant in candlelit basements. Sometimes they wear wedding rings, host holiday dinners, and pass down heirlooms soaked in trauma. The most insidious cults are often the ones closest to home, those that masquerade as family while operating as closed systems of control, fear, and indoctrination. When a family begins to punish dissent, pathologize autonomy, and normalize abuse, it ceases to be a container for love and becomes a mechanism for control. These systems don't just happen, they are architected. And like all architecture, they are built to last unless dismantled with discernment and care. I once met a family whose internal structure mirrored everything I've come to understand about cultic systems. At the center was a man who operated like a cult leader, charismatic, controlling, and deeply feared. His power wasn't earned through wisdom or care, but through manipulation, abuse, and a carefully engineered mythology of dominance. The family revolved around him like satellites around a dying star. Loyalty was synonymous with obedience, and obedience was synonymous with survival. Members committed crimes not out of malice, but out of desperation to belong. He preyed on the vulnerable, especially those with criminal histories, exploiting their shame and using his own family as pawns in a closed circuit of fear, profit, and degradation. What struck me most was how thoroughly he had broken their sense of self. They demeaned themselves willingly, not because they lacked intelligence or strength, but because they had been taught that their worth was measured by how much they could endure for him. Even outsiders who tried to help were absorbed into the system, manipulated, and discarded. Their suffering became another currency in his empire of control. This wasn't just dysfunction. It was architecture. A system designed to perpetuate harm, reward submission, and punish awakening. And like many cult-like families, it celebrated cohesion during moments of transition, especially when grooming new members to replace those who had escaped. The illusion of peace was always temporary. It was the calm before deeper entrenchment. Not all cults live in compounds. Some live in cul-de-sacs. They host potlucks, attend PTA meetings, and decorate for Christmas. They pass down stories of sacrifice and loyalty, reframing trauma as tradition. They punish dissent not with exile, but with silence, shame, and spiritual condemnation. These families operate as closed loops. They fear the outside world not because it's dangerous, but because it threatens their mythology. They teach children that love is earned through compliance, that questioning is betrayal, and that suffering is sacred. The danger lies not only in the harm inflicted, but in the illusion of safety projected. Families that function as cults often revolve around a central belief system, religious, political, or moral, that cannot be questioned. These beliefs become sacred scripts, and deviation is treated as betrayal. Children are taught that truth is inherited, not discovered. Emotional manipulation, guilt, and shame are used to enforce obedience. Love becomes conditional. Affection is weaponized. Children learn early that their value is tied to how well they perform their assigned role. Outsiders are framed as threats. Independent thinking is pathologized. Members are taught to distrust their own instincts and rely solely on the family for identity, validation, and moral direction. Stories of sacrifice, loyalty, and persecution are mythologized to justify abuse. The family becomes a symbolic fortress, under siege by the dangerous world beyond. These myths are repeated like scripture, reinforcing the idea that suffering is noble and escape is heresy. Without healing, these patterns calcify. They become legacy. Children are cast as saviors, scapegoats, enforcers, or silent witnesses, roles that mirror the unresolved trauma of their parents. These roles are rarely chosen. They are assigned, often before the child can speak. Emotional, physical, or spiritual abuse is reframed as discipline, tradition, or tough love. The line between care and control is blurred. Pain becomes a rite of passage. Whistleblowers within the family are gaslit, ostracized, or labeled mentally unstable. The system protects itself by discrediting its challengers. Truth-tellers are cast as villains. The family becomes a self-cleaning oven, burning away dissent and sanitizing its own mythology. It adapts to scrutiny by becoming more covert, more performative, more dangerous. One of the most insidious tactics used by cult-like family systems is the deliberate severing of ties with external accountability structures, especially law enforcement, child protective services, and mental health professionals. This isolation isn't accidental, it's engineered. These families instill deep suspicion toward outsiders, portraying social workers, therapists, and police as agents of corruption or persecution. This primes members to reject help even when suffering is acute. Internal dysfunction is cloaked in a myth of privacy, loyalty, or spiritual warfare. Abuse is reframed as sacred discipline. Seeking help is cast as betrayal. Some families relocate to remote areas or homeschool children to avoid scrutiny. Others maintain a public facade of normalcy while tightly controlling access to the inner world. When intervention does occur, cult-like families may coach children to lie, manipulate records, or use religious or cultural exemptions to deflect accountability. Survivors often inherit a fear of institutions, making it harder to seek healing later in life. The system's grip extends beyond the immediate abuse. It shapes how future generations perceive safety, authority, and truth. This isolation is not just a symptom, it's a strategy. It ensures that the family remains the sole arbiter of reality, morality, and justice. And it's precisely why independent individuals, those who seek therapy, question authority, or build lives outside the system, are seen as dangerous. They threaten the architecture of control. Independent thinkers within these systems are often seen as existential threats. By questioning inherited beliefs, they expose the cracks in the cult's mythology. Their refusal to conform becomes a beacon for others, especially younger members, who sense the possibility of freedom. Cult-like families rely on cohesion through control. Sovereignty introduces entropy. And with entropy comes the potential for transformation. Breaking free requires more than escape. It demands mythic reframing, spiritual protection, and communal validation. Language is liberation. Identifying the cultic dynamics is the first step toward sovereignty. Naming breaks the spell. Healing involves disentangling identity from inherited roles and rediscovering authentic values. It's a return to the sacred self. Survivors often become mythmakers, crafting new narratives rooted in discernment, autonomy, and love without control. These stories become maps for others. True healing flourishes in spaces that honor complexity, validate experience, and reject dogma. These communities become sanctuaries for awakening. When a member escapes a cult-like family system, whether through awakening, exile, or external intervention, the structure doesn't collapse. It adapts. The family may appear more functional than ever. Rituals are revived, grievances are buried, and a collective narrative of survival is reinforced. This cohesion masks the deeper need to restore control. New or vulnerable members, often children, in-laws, or returning exiles, are subtly conditioned to adopt the roles left vacant. Praise, inclusion, and emotional warmth are used as tools of indoctrination. The piece is performative. The rescapee is often recast as unstable, selfish, or dangerous. Their absence becomes a cautionary tale. The family myth is rewritten to justify their departure and sanctify those who remain. This phase is critical because it feels like healing, but it's actually reconsolidation. The system is not dismantling its abusive architecture, it's fortifying it with fresh mortar. And those who sense the dissonance, who feel the warmth but hear the echo of control, are often the next to awaken. To awaken within a cult-like family system is to become a threat. But it is also to become an invitation. Survivors who reclaim their sovereignty don't just escape, they transform. They become architects of new mythologies, protectors of truth, and guides for those still trapped in the architecture of control. And in doing so, they don't just dismantle the cult, they build something sacred in its place.